Again. Welcome to all of you who are joining. I wish we were in Arizona and I wish we were in person, but this is not the year for us to be together. Hopefully next year in summer we will be together person to person, face to face, and be able to learn from each other. We really wanted to talk to you tonight just to sort of lay the groundwork for the conference that is scheduled to begin a little bit later this month on the 23rd. I think it's really important to have this grounding, if you will, because you get to the conference often and the panels are so intense, the presentations sort of overwhelming, and sometimes it feels like you get a little lost in the shuffle. So we wanted to start from the beginning and tell you a little bit about PPMD and tell you how we got here and who's here with us tonight. So on the agenda tonight, we have Ryan Fisher, who's our SVP of Advocacy. He's the one who leads our Washington efforts and leads us around Washington, D.C., and we do really amazing work in terms of advocacy. It's been a real joy to see the investment of the federal government, the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, and the Center for Disease Control to invest in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We also have with us Claudia Senesak. Claudia is from the University of Florida. She's a physical therapist, and much more than a physical therapist, she works in imaging DMD, and really knows our boys and how to help them from inside out. We also have Denise Grunder. Denise is an educator, and she looks at the behaviors of children and really teaches children with special needs as well, and knows how to manage children much better than I've ever managed children. And I think she's going to give you some really good advice tonight about how to manage in the face of Duchenne, and certainly how to manage some of the behaviors that we see. And last but not least is Rachel Schrader. Rachel is our SVP of Clinical Care. Rachel manages the care programs, thinks about care nonstop, and how to deliver interdisciplinary care in the best way possible to preserve and protect our sons and their lives. So that's our run-up tonight. We will go forward, but first I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our story of PPMD and how we started. So this is the agenda that I just went through, and sorry I didn't change slides to show you that, but this is the schedule. We'll go from me to Rachel Schrader to Claudia Senesak and then to Denise. Here's our story. So long ago, like many of you, my two boys were diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This is Chris and Patrick, and at the time that they were diagnosed, I asked questions like, well, how do we provide the best care and treatment? And the answer was, it's not known. I asked about the investment in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and it was minimal. There was no government investment in rare disease, let alone Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I asked about the biotech and pharma. Are they developing therapies? There was no biotech or pharma interested in developing a therapy for Duchenne. I asked about the multi-system approach. How about their heart? How about their lungs? How about their endocrine system? And there was no interest from subspecialists. So essentially, when my sons were diagnosed, the answer was, you have no chance. There's no treatment and certainly no cure. So in 1987, probably many of you were toddlers at that point. In 1986, the gene was cloned. So this was the first gene cloned. It's one of the largest in the human genome. In 1987, Eric Hoffman identified the missing protein called dystrophin. So at that point in our time, we thought, oh gosh, everything's going to happen quickly and soon, and we're going to see amazing things on the horizon. It turned out it wasn't for that horizon back then in the 80s and 90s. But today we have a much different picture that I'd like to tell you about and how we got here. So in 1994, we had lots of questions. What's the current state of research? What are we doing? What do we know about this disease? How well is it characterized? So what is this disease and what happens? We asked about the federal investment in Duchenne, and as I mentioned to you, it was really non-existent. In fact, and I think still today when you say Duchenne, you have many people responding and say, I've never heard of it, I don't know the name. This Duchenne was sort of in the umbrella or under the umbrella of the neuromuscular diseases, and few people recognize Duchenne, although it is the predominant muscular dystrophy. And so we sat around and thought about what are the gaps that we need to fill and how are we going to fill them. We started investing in research, but as we thought about investing in research way back then, we also thought about how do you leverage money? Because when we think about drug development, and you've probably heard these numbers tossed around a lot, that companies will say it takes $1 billion to develop a drug. If it takes $1 billion to develop a drug and we're a small nonprofit investing 100,000 or several 100,000, to get to $1 billion is going to take a lot of time, and time we don't have. So one of the first and primary things we did long ago, in 1999, there was a workshop in Duchenne muscular dystrophy that was requested by us. And the National Institutes of Health held that workshop in 1999. And by 2000, we were thinking about how to leverage money and how to get the National Institutes of Health interested in this disease, how to get the Center for Disease Control interested, how to really garner a great deal of support, government support, so there would be an infusion of money and research and interest and excitement about this disease. So we were able to participate in the writing of a piece of legislation called the Muscular Dystrophy Care Act. The MD Care Act, as it's known as, has three very important points to it. The first are centers of excellence. And when we talk about centers of excellence, these are also named Wellstone Centers of Excellence, because the late Senator Wellstone was really a champion for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and he died as he was trying to get back into office the second round, or the third round, I guess, for him. He died in a plane crash before he could serve that next term, but he certainly was an advocate for us. So these Wellstone Centers of Excellence are collaborative centers. They're basic science. They have to have a translational component, so something to move into human beings, in this case, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and they must be coordinated together. So they have underlying core programs that they work across. There are 6 Wellstone centers, and there are 2 currently focused on Duchenne. In the Center for Disease Control, that was really assigned by the Muscular Dystrophy Care Act to develop a consensus around standards of care. In 2010 was the first publication in Lancet about the standards of care. So this really set the stage for us to think in a multi-system way about how to treat Duchenne muscular dystrophy. In addition to that, there was another publication in 2018 that updated those initial standards. And in 2018, I'm happy to say that one of the components in the update was how to care for adults with Duchenne. Way back when my boys were here, that wasn't even on the horizon. So now we know they're going to live to be adults, and we need to know how to provide the best care and treatment for them. In addition to having centers of excellence and a standard of care, the other component of this piece of legislation was there must be a research plan and a coordinating committee. So the coordinating committee is a committee, it's a multidisciplinary committee across National Institutes of Health and Center for Disease Control and the Department of Defense and Center for Medicaid, Rehabilitation Medicine. So it's a very nice cross-section of individuals, all who contribute significantly to making life better and developing treatments for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So this bill was set into law in 2001 and signed by President Bush. It was reauthorized in 2008 and again amended in 2014. And this time in 2014, in addition to updating the act, there was a provision called a sundown provision. So that meant that this Muscular Dystrophy Care Act will always be in place and always be a mandate for the National Institutes of Health, Department of Defense, Center for Disease Control, et cetera, to invest in Duchenne muscular dystrophy and all the other muscular dystrophies. So this, from then until now, has leveraged hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think our view was the tipping point to get industry to really be excited about Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So today, this is our pipeline. This really makes me always catch my breath when I look at this pipeline, because there wasn't a pipeline when my boys were here. And so you can see in the green, these are restoring dystrophin, so the fundamental protein that's absent. So how do you get a protein called dystrophin back, or how do you substitute a different protein? So that's the green. We know that what happens when muscle cells die is we get inflammation and fibrosis, and you see in the blue and the gold or orange, you see the pipeline looking at reducing fibrosis and reducing inflammation and combating fibrosis. And then there also, in terms of heart, we know the heart doesn't regulate calcium very well because the heart is a muscle too. So how do you reinstate that calcium balance? And then finally in the brown is improving muscle growth and protection. So this is a broad spectrum of opportunity for Duchenne muscular dystrophy to really treat the disease. And I will say that I think we all can agree that it's going to take a variety or a combination of therapies to completely halt the progression, in terms of stop the progression for every individual. And it might very well be that each individual deserves a different combination of therapies to really stall the disease and stop it. We also look at the heart and improving heart function and restoring cells to improve the energy of the heart and the energy of muscle. So this is a really robust pipeline, and looking for the right cocktail for the right patient at the right time so that Duchenne is stopped in its tracks. So here's what we do as PPMD. You kind of think about, so what do you do with your time? We try to invest and really accelerate the whole pipeline, from discovery by investing in research, by thinking about how do we really fully characterize in terms of biomarkers, how do we really understand this disease better. Clinical trial readiness, we talk about certified care centers. This means that we have 29 certified care centers in the United States and 2 outside of the United States. And this is a program Rachel's going to talk about. And the reason for a certified care center is because this is confirmation that they are adhering to the standards of care. That when you go to a certified center or a CDCC, this means you have an interdisciplinary team who know well the standard of care and who are able to deliver that to your son, which is terrific. We also work with a critical path consortium, and the critical path and all of these terms kind of run together for you. But the idea here is really to look at data to see if we can have a disease progression model, so that we can see where a child is on the spectrum, so that we know what drugs, how to manage, and how to do better clinical trials. So all of that data really enhances our understanding of the disease process and what we need to do to intervene. We also have a drug development roundtable. This is where all companies are welcome that are interested in Duchenne. And we talk about things in the preclinical space, like the question of how can we enhance this protocol you're developing? How can we recruit to this protocol? How can we make patients have less burden in participation? So this is all the readiness for clinical trial. If we look at the phase 2 and 3, that's recruitment. How do we educate parents? How do we educate siblings and grandparents who are going to need to understand this trial protocol? How do we educate ourselves? How do we learn about the patient experience and really apply that to trials? Because trials are hard and they're burdensome and they're frustrating, and they're also amazing opportunities for families to participate. So how do we recruit? In the regulatory approval, what we want to do is get these drugs to the point of approval, and then the FDA makes a decision based on the data that they're seeing. So we work with Congress, we work with lots of other people to really enhance the FDA's knowledge and understanding, so that they understand what value this has. They understand the urgent and unmet need here, and so that they are engaged in this process and understand what benefit looks like and what value that is to our patients and families. I think all of us in this disease kind of thought once we get to approval, once the FDA says this drug is approved, we're done. But what we learned in our approvals is that we aren't quite finished there. We have another hurdle, and that is the payer environment. How do we make sure that everyone who's eligible gets access to these therapies? How do we make sure that these therapies are reimbursed? How do we make sure that this financial burden doesn't negatively impact our families? So we look at every single step along the way so that we can improve the experience, improve the understanding, and really accelerate the development of these therapies. Because I think as a family member, soon means today, the need is today, and the need, and we also know that every single day means a difference in our son's lives. So we at PPMD try to accelerate the process to the greatest extent possible. This is our investment in research. It's been $50 million. We still invest in research. We will never know enough about this disease, and we'll always have questions because each boy is different. Even in families where there are several boys, you'll probably, those of you that have several boys with Duchenne, you'll notice that each one of them is a little bit different. So we're constantly investing in research, constantly investing in the next question. We funded about 260 research grants. We've been supporting clinical trials. We've been doing and running through the gamut of opportunity here to impact research, and certainly will continue to do so until we're sure that every young boy ever diagnosed has treatment. So we have an impact on care as well. When my boys were diagnosed, there were not interdisciplinary centers. For the most part, there was sort of this, well, just go home kind of look. And so what we've done is really thought about how do you ensure and how do you assure parents that they're getting the best care possible. So we have a certified Duchenne care program. We work with over 700 providers. We work in this network to ensure that care delivered to your son and to some of the girls who are manifesting carriers is the best possible with the greatest amount of knowledge we have today. We also looked bi-directionally. We want to hear from you. What are the gaps that you're seeing? What are the problems you're seeing that we might be missing? We're all together in this, and we need to learn from each other to ensure that care and treatment is simultaneous and good and the best possible for our children. So this is what we do. Over time, we thought about these critical pieces. We have now a couple amazing things, an engaged patient community. I think on social media, we see incredible engagement across, engagement with our care providers, engagement with regulators, engagement with companies. So we have a very engaged patient community. We have standards of care. We have a well-characterized disease, and we're still looking for biomarkers and natural history studies, but we have a fairly well-characterized disease. We now have a robust pipeline of potential therapies. We've written guidance for FDA. We've written guidance for industry and some efforts with industry to look at these trials and lessen the burden. We've validated screening tests, developed outcome measures. You're probably familiar with the North Star, the performance of the upper limb, supine to standing. All of those have been developed collaboratively with physical therapists, with industry, with academics. This is a family affair, and we're all part of this family. We work with the Drug Development Roundtable with all of our industry partners, and we have a registry, and I can't tell you enough about this registry. It is a robust registry. It's a patient-reported registry that it can also connect to the hospital record as well. And this means we can integrate data and really look at a robust data set so we better understand the patients who have this disease, the progression within the disease, what treatments are very effective, what treatments work, the steroid regimen that they're on. We can really look at this data and really enhance the patient experience and improve care along the way. We continuously work with the FDA and continuously inform them about life with Duchenne so that they can make really good decisions about approvals for our sons. So up next is Rachel, and Rachel's going to be talking to you about establishing a care plan. What do you do with the diagnosis? How do you ensure you're getting the best care? And what are the questions you might need to ask? So over to you, Rachel.